She slipped beside the soft earth, and her dog suddenly started digging like his life depended on it. The road to the cabin barely deserved its name, fading into a narrow trail swallowed by trees. Evelyn stepped out into the cold silence, the wood beneath her feet sagging with age. Inside, nothing looked abandoned, just paused. A mug on the table, a coat by the door, and behind her, her German shepherd refused to enter, staring past her, like something inside wasn't finished yet. Would you trust your instincts, or your dog's, if something felt off like this? The road narrowed long before Evelyn Harper realized it had stopped being a road. Gravel turned to dirt. Dirt gave way to two pale tire tracks cutting through brittle grass and fallen leaves. By the time she slowed the car to a crawl, the trees had already closed in around her, tall and quiet. Their branches tangled overhead like something trying to keep the sky out. She leaned forward slightly, both hands tight on the wheel. "This has to be it," she murmured, though there was no sign. No mailbox, no marker. Nothing but forest and the faint hum of her engine. In the back seat, Coda shifted. The German shepherd had been restless for the last 10 minutes. Not whining, not barking, just alert. His head lifted higher than usual, ears pricked forward, nose working the air through the barely cracked window. Evelyn noticed. She always noticed. "You smell something?" she asked softly. Coda didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed ahead. The trees opened without warning, just a break in the wall of trunks. And there it was. The cabin. It sat slightly off-center in a clearing that had long since given up trying to stay open. Brush crept in from all sides. Thin branches scratched against the outer walls. The roof dipped in the middle, as if it had grown tired of holding itself up. Evelyn let the car roll to a stop. For a moment, she didn't move. She just looked. This was what $100 bought. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once, then went silent again. Evelyn reached for the key, turned it off. The quiet settled fast, too fast. She opened the door. Cold air slipped in immediately, carrying the smell of damp leaves, and something else, fainter, heavier, the kind of scent that didn't belong to the season. She stepped out carefully, one hand bracing the door, her shoes pressed into soft ground. Not mud, not quite, just earth that had held too much moisture for too long. Coda jumped down from the back seat beside her, but instead of moving forward, he stopped, completely still. Evelyn turned. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the cabin. His body had gone rigid, not aggressive, not fearful, just locked. Ears forward, tail low, every muscle focused on the structure ahead. "Coda," she said gently. No response. She followed his gaze. The cabin didn't move. Of course it didn't. But something about it made her hesitate. The front porch sagged slightly on the left side. One of the support posts leaned just enough to be noticeable. The wooden boards were dark with age and moisture, some warped, some cracked. A single window faced her. The glass was intact, but cloudy, as if it hadn't been cleaned in years. Evelyn reached back into the car and pulled out her bag. The keys sat in her palm now, small and cold. "Well," she said quietly, more to herself than to the dog, "we're here." She took a step forward. Coda didn't follow. She stopped again, glancing back at him. "Come on," she coaxed. Still nothing. He remained where he was, eyes fixed on the cabin, nose twitching faintly. Evelyn let out a slow breath. "Suit yourself." She turned and walked toward the porch. Each step felt louder than it should have. Dry leaves cracking underfoot. The soft creak of the boards as she climbed the 2 shallow steps. The porch shifted slightly under her weight. Not enough to give way, just enough to remind her it could. She paused at the door. The wood was faded to a dull gray, the paint long gone. A simple metal handle. No decoration. No sign anyone had tried to make it welcoming. Evelyn slid the key into the lock. It stuck for a second. She adjusted her grip. Turned it again. This time it gave. A dull click. She pushed the door open. It resisted at first, then gave way with a slow, dragging sound against the floor. The smell hit her immediately. Wet timber, dust, old air that hadn't moved in years, and beneath it, something else. Faint, metallic. Not strong enough to name, just enough to notice. Evelyn stepped inside. The light followed her in through the open door, stretching across the floor in a pale strip. She didn't go far, just 2 steps, enough to see. A small table sat near the center of the room. On it, a mug. White, chipped along the rim. A dark stain clung to the bottom, dried and forgotten. Not recently used, but not cleaned either. Next to it, a book lay open. Face down, as if someone had set it aside mid-page. Evelyn's eyes moved slowly across the room. A coat hung by the door, brown, worn at the sleeves, still shaped like it belonged to someone, not folded, not stored, just left. She stood there, unmoving. Something about it didn't feel right. Not abandoned, not the way places usually were. This felt paused, like a breath held too long. Behind her, the porch creaked softly. Evelyn turned. Coda stood at the threshold. He hadn't stepped inside. One paw rested just over the line where wood met earth, the rest of him still outside. His eyes moved past her, scanning the room, slowly, carefully, as if he were trying to understand something he couldn't quite reach. "It's okay," Evelyn said gently, but her voice didn't carry much conviction. Coda didn't move. The silence inside the cabin pressed in, thicker than the air outside. Evelyn turned back to the room. The mug, the coat, the open book. Small things. Ordinary things. But together, they told a different story. Someone had been here. Not long enough ago to erase themselves, and not long enough to finish what they started. Evelyn felt a faint chill move through her. Not from the cold, from the stillness. She set her bag down slowly by the door. Behind her, Coda remained where he was, watching, waiting, as if the cabin had said something, and he was the only one who heard it. Evelyn stood in the middle of the room a moment longer, her eyes drifting back to Coda. He hadn't moved, still at the doorway, still watching. "All right," she said quietly, almost under her breath. "We'll take it slow." She turned away first. Sometimes that's all it took with him. Not pressure, not calling, just letting him decide. She moved deeper into the cabin. The floor creaked under every step. Not sharp cracks, just tired wood shifting, settling, reminding her it had been holding weight for a long time. Dust had gathered along the edges of the room, thin but noticeable. Not thick enough to suggest decades, just enough to say no one had cared for the place in a while. She passed the table again. The mug. She reached out this time, touched it. Cold. Dry. Her fingers lingered on the chipped rim, then pulled back. There was something strange about touching another person's absence. She wiped her hand lightly on her coat. "Let's see what we've got," she murmured. The cabin was small, One main room, a narrow kitchen space to the side, and a short hallway leading to what she assumed was a bedroom and bathroom. Nothing fancy. Nothing unexpected. And yet, it didn't feel empty. That was the part she couldn't shake. She opened the first cabinet in the kitchen. A few plates. One bowl. A rusted can opener. She opened the next. Nothing. The refrigerator stood in the corner. Old. Yellowed with age. She pulled the handle. It groaned softly, then opened. Empty. A faint smell drifted out. Stale, not rotten. Like something that had been cleaned, but not recently enough. Evelyn closed it again. Behind her, she heard it. A soft shift. She turned. Coda had stepped inside. Just one step. His nose lowered toward the floor, moving slowly, cautiously, his body still tense but no longer frozen. "That's it," she said gently. "Easy." He didn't look at her. He moved along the edge of the room, sniffing, pausing, then moving again. His path wasn't random. It followed the walls. Evelyn watched him for a moment, then turned back to the hallway. The bedroom door was already open. Inside, a narrow bed sat against the far wall. The blanket was folded neatly at the foot, like someone had made it before stepping out for the day. A small dresser stood beside it, one drawer slightly open. Evelyn crossed the room slowly. She pulled the drawer open the rest of the way. Empty. No clothes. No personal items. Just the faint outline where things used to be. She closed it again. The window above the bed let in a thin strip of gray light. Dust floated in it, slow and quiet. Evelyn stood there longer than she meant to, trying to picture someone living here, trying to imagine a morning, waking up, making coffee, sitting at that table, and then leaving. Without finishing. She shook the thought away. "No point guessing," she said softly. But the words didn't settle. She moved back into the main room. Coda had reached the far wall now. The back wall. He stood facing it, head slightly tilted. Still, watching. The same stillness from outside. Evelyn felt it again, that faint shift in the air. "Hey," she called gently. Coda didn't move. She walked toward him, slower this time. "What is it?" When she reached his side, she followed his gaze. The wall looked no different from the others. Same wood, same aging, same faint lines where boards met. But as she stepped closer, she caught it. That smell again. Faint, metallic. Not strong enough to alarm. Just there, lingering beneath the scent of wood and dust. Evelyn leaned in slightly. It wasn't coming from the whole wall, just one section, lower, near the base. She straightened. Probably nothing. Old pipes, maybe. Something buried. Something she didn't understand. "That's enough for today," she said, more firmly now. Coda didn't respond, but after a moment he stepped back, not relaxed, just finished. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Good," she said. "Let's get you settled." The afternoon passed in small tasks. She opened windows, letting what little air there was drift through. She swept the floor with an old broom she found leaning behind the door. She wiped down the table. The mug, she moved to the sink, but she didn't wash it, not yet. Evening came quickly. The gray sky outside dimmed into a darker shade, and the trees seemed to lean closer with the fading light. Evelyn set up her small things. A blanket from her bag, a change of clothes, a flashlight placed within reach. Simple. Temporary. That's what she told herself. Just until things settle, she said aloud, as if the cabin needed to hear it. Coda lay down near the door, not in the center of the room, not near her, near the exit, facing inward, watching. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. Wind slipped through the cracks in the walls, low and steady. It made a soft whistling sound as it moved through the gaps, rising and falling like something breathing. Evelyn wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You've heard worse," she muttered. She sat at the table for a while, hands folded, eyes drifting now and then to the coat still hanging by the door. She thought about taking it down, folding it, putting it away, but she didn't. It stayed where it was, like everything else. Waiting. When she finally lay down on the bed, the mattress creaked under her weight. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. She closed her eyes, listened. The wind, the wood, the quiet. Sleep came in pieces, light, broken. Each time she drifted off, something pulled her back. A sound, a shift, or just the feeling that something wasn't quite right. At some point in the night, she opened her eyes. The room was dark, but not silent. She turned her head slightly. Coda was still there. But he wasn't lying down anymore. He was sitting, perfectly still, facing the back wall. The same place, the same spot, his ears forward, his body alert, watching, as if nothing else in the world mattered. Evelyn pushed herself up slowly. "Coda," she whispered. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't look at her. He just sat there, staring at the wall and whatever it held, or had once held. Evelyn pulled the blanket tighter around herself. The cabin creaked softly in the dark, and for the first time since she arrived, she didn't tell herself it was just the wind. Evelyn stayed awake longer than she meant to. The dark inside the cabin wasn't complete. A thin wash of moonlight slipped through the window, just enough to shape the room into shadows and edges. The table, the chair, the coat by the door, and Coda. Still sitting, still facing the same section of wall. She watched him for a while, counting his breaths. Slow, steady, not frightened, focused. Eventually, the weight of the day pulled her back down. Her eyes closed without asking permission. Sleep came in shallow layers, drifting in and out, never fully taking hold. When morning finally arrived, it did so quietly. A pale gray light pushed through the window, the kind that didn't warm anything, just revealed it. Evelyn opened her eyes. The first thing she did was look toward the wall. Coda was gone. She pushed herself up, heart giving a small, unexpected jump. "Coda?" No answer. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, wincing slightly at the stiffness in her joints. The cold had settled in overnight, creeping into her bones. Then she heard it. Outside. A soft, rhythmic sound. Scraping. She moved to the door and pulled it open. Cold air slipped in again, sharper now in the morning. It carried the smell of wet leaves and something else, faint beneath it. Coda was behind the cabin. She stepped down carefully from the porch and followed the sound. The ground dipped slightly behind the structure, where the land sloped toward a narrow stretch of trees. The earth here looked darker, looser. Coda stood near the base of the back wall, circling, not pacing, not restless, intentional. He walked a slow loop around a small patch of ground, nose low, ears forward. When he completed the circle, he stopped. Then he scratched, just twice. Quick, shallow strokes. The dirt shifted slightly under his paws. Then he stopped. He lowered his head, sniffed again, and let out a low, quiet whine. Not loud, not urgent, confused. Evelyn watched him from a few steps away. "What is it?" she asked softly. Coda didn't look at her. He stepped back, circled again. Same path, same pace, same spot. Scratch, scratch. Pause, whine. Evelyn moved closer. The soil beneath her shoes felt different from the rest of the yard. Softer, less compacted. The early frost that had hardened the surrounding ground hadn't settled here the same way. She crouched slightly, studying it. It wasn't freshly disturbed, not recently, but it wasn't natural either, like something had been turned, then left. "How long you been at this?" she murmured. Coda circled again. Same pattern. He wasn't digging to hunt. She knew that. He wasn't searching randomly. Every movement was measured, repeated, like he was trying to solve something. Evelyn reached down and brushed the surface lightly with her fingers. The top layer came away easily, too easily. She frowned, then stood back up slowly. "All right," she said, mostly to herself. "Not today." Coda stopped moving. He looked at her this time, just for a second. Then he stepped away from the patch and walked back toward the cabin. But he didn't relax. Not completely. Evelyn followed him inside. The smell hit her again as soon as she crossed the threshold. Wood, dust, and that faint metallic trace, stronger now that she knew where to look. She walked straight to the back wall. Coda had already taken his position, standing, watching. Evelyn moved closer. She crouched slightly, leaning in. The boards were worn, aged like the rest of the cabin. But the scent, it lingered here, subtle, almost hidden. She pressed her palm lightly against the wood. Cold. Still. Nothing moved. Nothing shifted. She tapped it once with her knuckles. Solid. No hollow sound. "Probably nothing," she said again. But it didn't sound convincing anymore. Behind her, Coda let out another low whine. She glanced back at him. "You're not letting this go, are you?" He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Evelyn straightened slowly. "Fine," she said under her breath. "We'll keep an eye on it." The day moved forward. She kept busy, opened more windows, let the cold air move through the space, swept again, though there wasn't much left to clear, organized what little she had brought. Simple things, necessary things. But every so often, her eyes drifted. Back to the wall, back to the door, back to Coda. He didn't return to the spot right away. Not inside. But as the afternoon wore on and the light shifted outside, he moved again. Without a sound. Out the door. Around the back. Evelyn didn't follow this time. She stood at the window instead. Watching. Same pattern. Same circle. Same pause. Same scratch. The repetition settled into something heavier. Not curiosity anymore. Recognition. Whatever was out there, it wasn't random. And whatever Coda sensed, it wasn't fading. It was pulling him back. Over and over again. Evelyn rested her hand against the window frame, eyes fixed on the small patch of disturbed earth. The trees beyond it stood still in the cold light. No wind. No movement. Just quiet. And that quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt held, like something underneath it was waiting, not moving, not changing, Just waiting. Coda finished his circle, stopped, looked back at the cabin. For a brief second, his gaze met hers through the glass. Then he lowered his head again and scratched at the ground. Exactly the same way. Like he knew. He just didn't know how to show her. Yet. By late afternoon, the light had shifted into something thinner, stretched long across the clearing. The kind of light that made everything look farther away than it was. Evelyn stood at the doorway, watching Coda. He had finally stepped away from the patch of ground and returned to the porch, but he didn't settle. He stood near the edge, facing outward now, as if keeping watch over more than just the cabin. She folded her arms lightly. "You're not tired, are you?" Coda didn't respond. Evelyn exhaled slowly and turned back inside. The quiet in the cabin had changed since morning. It wasn't heavier exactly, just more noticeable. Like once you became aware of it, it didn't leave you alone. She needed supplies anyway. That was reason enough. By the time she started the car, the sun had dropped lower behind the trees. The narrow path out felt tighter than before, the branches brushing faintly against the sides of the vehicle as she eased forward. Coda sat upright in the passenger seat this time, alert again, watching. The drive into town took longer than she expected. The trees thinned gradually, replaced by open stretches of dry grass and scattered fence lines. Eventually, the road widened, gravel giving way to worn asphalt. A faded sign appeared near a bend. Ridge Hollow. Population barely listed. Evelyn slowed as she passed it. The town didn't feel abandoned, but it didn't feel busy either. A few buildings lined the main road. A gas station. A diner with a flickering sign. A general store with wide front windows clouded by age. She parked outside the store. The bell above the door rang softly when she stepped inside. Warm air met her first. Then the smell of old wood, coffee, and something sweet, maybe candy stored too long in glass jars. A woman stood behind the counter, mid-60s maybe, gray hair pulled back tightly, glasses resting low on her nose. She looked up. Afternoon. Evelyn nodded. Afternoon. The woman's eyes lingered just a second longer than necessary. Not unfriendly, just assessing. Evelyn moved down the aisle slowly, picking up what she needed. Bread, a few canned goods, a small bag of coffee. Nothing complicated, but she could feel it. The attention, not direct, just present. When she reached the counter, the woman had already set aside her book. "You staying around here?" she asked, her voice calm, measured. Evelyn placed the items down. "Just moved in," she said, "out past the ridge." The woman's hands paused for a fraction of a second, then resumed. "That's so." "Old place," Evelyn added. "Wooden cabin. Needed something quiet." The woman rang up the items without looking up. "What road?" "Didn't see a name for it," Evelyn said. "Just a turn off past the county line. Cabin sits back in the trees." The woman's hand stopped again, this time longer. She lifted her eyes. "End of that dirt track?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. "That's the one." A silence settled between them. Not long, but noticeable. The woman placed the final item in a paper bag. "You bought it?" she asked. "For $100, Evelyn said. Something shifted behind the woman's eyes. Not surprise. Not exactly. Recognition. "That place," she began, then stopped. Evelyn waited. The woman looked past her, toward the window, as if checking something outside that wasn't there. Then she shook her head slightly. "Been empty a while," she said. Evelyn studied her. Feels like someone just walked out, she said quietly. The woman didn't respond right away. Her fingers tapped once against the counter. Then she leaned in slightly. Some places, she said, her voice lower now, don't like being talked about. Evelyn held her gaze. Why not? The woman straightened. Because folks around here know when to leave things alone. The tone had changed. Not harsh, but closed. Evelyn nodded slowly. All right, she said. I appreciate the warning. The woman pushed the bag toward her. Just be careful what you go looking for, she added. Evelyn took the bag. I'm not looking for anything, she said. The woman gave a small, tight smile. That's what most people say. Evelyn stepped outside again. The air felt cooler now, sharper. She crossed the street toward the diner without really thinking about it. The sign buzzed faintly overhead. Inside, the space was small. A few tables, a long counter. The smell of fried food lingering in the air. 3 people sat inside. All of them looked up when she entered. Conversation stopped. Just like that. Evelyn walked to the counter and sat. A waitress approached, wiping her hands on a towel. What can I get you? Coffee's fine, Evelyn said. The woman poured it without asking anything else. But the silence remained. Thick. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the cup. Warm. Steady. Just moved into that cabin out past the ridge, she said after a moment, her voice calm. She didn't look up, but she felt it. Every shift, every glance, a chair scraped softly against the floor. One of the men stood, left money on the table, walked out. Another followed soon after. The waitress stayed, but she moved slower now, quieter. Evelyn lifted her eyes. Something I said? She asked. The waitress shook her head quickly. No, ma'am. But she didn't meet Evelyn's gaze. Evelyn took a sip of her coffee. It tasted bitter. Not bad. Just stronger than she expected. What happened out there? She asked. The waitress froze, just for a second. Then she forced a small shrug. Nothing I know about. Evelyn watched her. You sure? The woman picked up the coffee pot again, though it was already full. That place should have stayed quiet, she muttered. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly around the cup. That's what the woman at the store said. The waitress looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment, something flickered there. Something close to fear. Then it was gone. Best finish your coffee before it gets cold, she said softly. Evelyn didn't press further. She finished the cup, left money on the counter, and walked out into the fading light. The drive back felt longer, the road darker, the trees closer. When the cabin finally came into view, it looked exactly the same. Still, quiet, waiting. Coda was on the porch when she pulled up. He stood as she stepped out of the car, watched her, then turned his head slowly, toward the back of the cabin. Evelyn followed his gaze. The patch of ground sat undisturbed in the dim light. Nothing moving. Nothing changed. And yet, the silence around it felt heavier now, like it wasn't just the woods keeping quiet. It was people, too. Evelyn stood there a moment longer than she meant to, the grocery bag still in her hand. Coda hadn't moved from the porch. His eyes stayed fixed on the back of the cabin. Same place. Same quiet focus. Evelyn followed him up the steps, the wood creaking under her weight. She set the bag down inside without much thought, her mind still caught somewhere between the town and the trees. Strange people, she muttered. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she meant the people. The rest of the evening passed slowly. She ate little, just bread and a bit of canned soup warmed over a small burner. The cabin held the heat unevenly, pockets of warmth near the stove, cold settling into the corners. Coda stayed near the door, watching, not restless, not pacing, just waiting. At some point, Evelyn found herself watching him more than anything else. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" she asked quietly. Coda didn't answer, but his ears shifted slightly, as if he had heard something beyond her voice. Night came early again. The wind picked up, brushing through the trees in long, low passes. It didn't howl. It whispered, constant, unbroken. Evelyn lay down, but sleep didn't come easy. Her thoughts circled. The store, the diner, the way people had gone silent, and always the same image, that patch of ground. Just before dawn, she gave up trying to sleep. The air had grown colder. Her breath showed faintly in the dim light. Coda was already awake, standing, facing the door. Of course he was. Evelyn pushed herself up slowly. "All right," she said. "Let's see it again." She pulled on her coat and stepped outside. The ground was stiff with early frost, crunching lightly beneath her shoes. The clearing looked different in the morning. Clearer, colder. The trees stood sharp against the pale sky. Coda didn't wait this time. He moved ahead of her, circling the cabin and heading straight for the back. Same path, same purpose. Evelyn followed more carefully, her steps slower on the uneven ground. The patch was just as she remembered, dark soil, softer than everything around it. Coda began his routine. Circle, pause, scratch, whine. But this morning something in him had changed. There was more urgency in the way he moved, less hesitation. Evelyn stepped closer. "You think there's something here?" she asked, almost without thinking. Coda didn't look at her. He scratched again, longer this time. The dirt shifted, revealing a slightly darker layer beneath. Evelyn watched. Then, without meaning to, she stepped forward. Too quickly. Her foot landed on the edge of the softened ground, and the earth gave way. It wasn't a collapse, not dramatic. Just enough. The ground shifted under her weight, her footing gone in an instant. She slipped, hard. Her body twisted as she went down, her knee catching awkwardly against the uneven surface. Pain shot up her leg, sharp and immediate. "Ah!" The breath left her in a short, tight sound. She hit the ground on her side, her hand scraping against rough soil and small stones. For a moment she didn't move, just breathed. Shallow. Careful. Then she tried to sit up. The pain in her knee flared again, sharper this time. "Damn it!" She pressed her hand against her leg, testing it. Not broken, but wrong, weak, unsteady. She tried to push herself up. The moment she put weight on it, her leg buckled. She dropped back down with a frustrated breath. Coda was at her side instantly, no hesitation. He circled her once, quick, checking. Then he moved, straight to the patch. No circling this time, no pause. He began to dig, fast. His paws tore into the soft soil, sending dirt back in quick bursts. Evelyn watched, still catching her breath. "Coda, what are you doing?" He didn't stop, not even for a second. He dug deeper, more aggressively than before. Dirt piled behind him. The sound of it, quick, steady, filled the quiet clearing. Evelyn shifted slightly, dragging herself a few inches closer. "What is it?" she asked again. Coda paused, turned, came back to her. He nudged her arm with his nose, firm, insistent, then turned and ran back to the spot, and dug again, harder, faster. Evelyn stared at him, Something in her chest tightened. This wasn't confusion anymore. This wasn't habit. This was intention. "You want me to see it?" she whispered. Coda didn't look back this time. He kept digging. The soil gave way faster now, looser the deeper he went. Evelyn pushed herself forward, ignoring the protest in her knee. Slowly, carefully, she crawled closer. The smell hit her stronger here. That same faint metallic edge, but deeper now, heavier. Coda's paws struck something, a dull, hollow sound beneath the dirt. He stopped, just for a second, then scraped again, clearing more soil away. Evelyn reached the edge of the hole, her breath uneven. "What is that?" Coda stepped back slightly, giving her space. The dirt had shifted enough now, enough to see. A flat surface, wood, darkened with age, edges reinforced with rusted metal. A shape, not natural, not random. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she brushed away more dirt. Her fingers traced the edge. A line. A seam. Her breath caught. "This isn't just ground." Coda stood beside her now, quiet again. Watching. Waiting. Evelyn swallowed slowly. Her knee throbbed, but she barely noticed it anymore. Because now, she understood something. The dog hadn't been circling for no reason. The soil hadn't felt wrong by accident. This place, she brushed more dirt away, revealing the outline more clearly. A hatch, buried, hidden, and waiting for someone to find it. Coda sat back on his haunches, silent, still, as if he had done what he needed to do. And now, it was her turn. Evelyn stayed still for a moment, her hand resting lightly against the edge of the exposed wood. Her breathing hadn't settled yet. Not from the fall, not from the pain in her knee. From this. From what was right in front of her. Coda didn't move. He sat just behind her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth of him against the cold morning air. Waiting. Evelyn leaned forward carefully, shifting her weight onto her good leg. The ground beneath her hands was damp, cool to the touch. Loose soil clung to her fingers as she brushed more of it away. The shape became clearer, a rectangular outline. Wooden. Reinforced with strips of rusted metal along the edges. A hatch. Not something that had been placed casually. Not something that belonged to nature. Someone had put it here. On purpose. Her fingers traced the seam again. The wood was rough, splintered in places, but solid underneath. The metal was corroded, flaking slightly under her touch. "How long?" she murmured. The smell was stronger now, that same faint metallic scent, but deeper, older, like something sealed away. Evelyn shifted again, trying to get a better angle. Her knee protested sharply, sending a pulse of pain up her leg. She paused, closed her eyes for a second. "Just a minute," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to herself or the dog. Coda let out a soft breath behind her. Not impatient, just there. Evelyn reached forward again. She pressed her fingers into the gap where the wood met the metal edge. There was no handle, no visible latch, just a slight indentation where the two surfaces met. She hooked her fingers into it as best she could and pulled. Nothing. The hatch didn't move. She exhaled slowly. "Of course," she muttered. Years underground. Moisture. Time. She adjusted her grip, pushing dirt away from the edges, clearing what she could. Her hands worked slower now, more carefully, each movement deliberate. Coda stood up behind her. She could feel the shift in him, his body angled slightly forward, his attention fixed on the hatch, not the ground anymore. Evelyn tried again. This time, she pulled harder. The wood resisted. For a moment it felt like it wouldn't budge at all. Then, a faint sound. A dry, grinding shift. Barely audible. But enough. Evelyn froze. "You heard that?" she whispered. Coda didn't move, but his ears lifted slightly. She tightened her grip, pulled again. The hatch gave just a fraction. A thin line opened along one edge, releasing a breath of air from below. Cold, stale, carrying that metallic scent stronger now. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her chest tightening. "That's not good," she said under her breath. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not now. She repositioned her hands and pulled again, using more of her upper body this time. The hatch lifted a little higher. The sound deepened. Wood dragging against packed earth, metal scraping faintly. Coda stepped closer, his nose lowered toward the opening, but he didn't try to push past her. He just watched. Evelyn paused again, catching her breath. The opening was only a few inches now. Enough for air. Enough for smell. But not enough to see. She swallowed. Then, slowly, she leaned forward, careful not to put weight on her injured leg, careful not to let the hatch fall shut again. She widened the gap just enough to angle her head. Darkness. Complete. The kind that didn't soften with time. It just sat there. Waiting. Evelyn reached one hand back blindly until her fingers found a loose stick lying in the dirt nearby. She brought it forward and pushed it gently into the opening. No resistance. No immediate obstruction. Just space. Deeper than she expected. Her breath slowed. "There's something under there," she said quietly. Coda shifted again, his body now angled between her and the open clearing behind them. Not guarding. Just aware. Evelyn set the stick aside and adjusted her grip once more. "This might be a bad idea," she murmured. But the words didn't carry much weight, because she had already decided. She pulled, harder this time. The hatch lifted another few inches, enough now to reveal more than darkness. There was shape inside. Faint, edges catching what little light filtered down. A box, no. A trunk. Rectangular. Set into the space beneath. Evelyn's fingers tightened involuntarily. "Someone put that there," she whispered. Her voice sounded smaller now. The air around her felt heavier, quieter. Coda let out a low sound. Not a growl, not a whine. Something in between. Evelyn glanced back at him. "You knew," she said softly. He didn't respond. But he didn't look away either. She turned back to the opening. The trunk sat still beneath the surface, unmoved, untouched. For how long? She couldn't guess, but long enough to be forgotten, long enough to be hidden. Evelyn released one hand from the hatch and brushed more dirt away from the edges. Careful, slow. The opening widened just a little more, enough for her to reach in. She hesitated. Just for a second. Her hand hovered above the darkness. Then, she lowered it. The air inside was colder, drier. Her fingers brushed against the surface of the trunk. Wood. Solid. The edges reinforced, much like the hatch. Built to last. Built to stay closed. Evelyn pulled her hand back slowly. Her heart was beating harder now. Not from fear exactly. From something else. Something closer to realization. "This was meant to stay hidden," she said quietly. Coda sat down beside her again. Still. watching, waiting. Evelyn looked down at the opening once more, at the trunk, at the darkness surrounding it, and for the first time since she had arrived at the cabin, she understood something clearly. This place wasn't empty. It had never been empty. It had just been covered. And now, it wasn't anymore. Evelyn sat back slowly, her hands resting in the dirt beside her. The hatch remained open. The trunk below it sat untouched. But something had already shifted. The air didn't feel the same. It felt exposed. Coda stayed close, his body angled toward the opening, his eyes fixed on the darkness below. He wasn't tense the way he had been before. Not restless, just steady, as if this was what he had been waiting for. Evelyn let out a slow breath. "Well," she said quietly, her voice dry. "We're not stopping here." She adjusted her position, biting back the sharp protest in her knee. Using both hands, she pushed the hatch a little farther open, just enough to give herself room. The hinges groaned softly, a tired, reluctant sound, the kind something made when it had stayed closed for too long. She leaned forward again. This time she didn't hesitate. She reached down into the space and found the edge of the trunk. Her fingers curled under it. Heavy. Not impossible, but heavier than she expected. "All right," she muttered. She shifted her weight, pulling slowly. The trunk resisted at first, wedged slightly into the packed earth around it. But with a firm pull and a slight shift of angle, it came loose. Dirt crumbled from its sides. The sound of it falling echoed faintly inside the hollow space. Coda leaned closer, watching. Evelyn dragged the trunk upward inch by inch until it reached the edge of the opening. She paused there, catching her breath, then pulled again, lifting it fully out onto the ground beside her. It landed with a dull, solid thud. She sat back again, hands shaking slightly now, not from effort, from something else. The trunk was old, wooden, reinforced with metal bands that had darkened over time. The surface was scratched, worn, but intact. There was a latch on the front, closed, not locked. Evelyn stared at it for a long moment. The clearing around her felt quieter than before. No wind, no distant birds, just stillness. Coda shifted beside her and sat down, his gaze moving between her and the trunk. Waiting again. Always waiting. Evelyn reached forward slowly. Her fingers brushed the latch. Cold. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she lifted it. The metal gave with a soft click. The sound felt louder than it should have. She placed her hand on the lid, paused, then opened it. The hinges creaked, softer than the hatch, but just as old. The lid rose slowly, and inside, paper. Layers of it, carefully stacked, wrapped in cloth that had yellowed with age. Evelyn leaned closer. The smell rose immediately. Dry, faintly musty. Not rot, preserved. She reached in and lifted the top layer. Letters, dozens of them, folded neatly, some tied together with string, others loose. Her hands moved carefully now, gentle. She set them aside one by one, revealing what lay beneath. Photographs, black and white, faded, but clear enough. A woman stood in most of them, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair pulled back, eyes steady, not smiling, just present. In one photo, she stood in front of the very cabin Evelyn now owned. Same porch, same door, different time. Evelyn swallowed. "You lived here," she whispered. Coda let out a soft breath. Evelyn reached for the next item. A notebook, worn. The cover cracked along the edges, the pages inside slightly curled. She opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat, precise. The first page held a name, Lillian Cross. Evelyn read it again. Let it settle. Then she turned the page. The entries began simply. Dates, observations, notes about the land, about the town, about people. Normal things. At first, Evelyn flipped through a few pages. The tone shifted. Subtle at first, then clearer. Words underlined. Sentences repeated. Mentions of names. Same names, over and over. Evelyn slowed down, reading more carefully now. Her brow tightened slightly. This isn't just journaling, she murmured. Coda shifted again, settling closer to her side. The entries grew more detailed, more focused. Descriptions of meetings, of land being sold quietly, of properties changing hands without notice, of people asking questions, and then disappearing from the conversation entirely. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the edge of the page. What were you looking into? She whispered. She turned another page. The handwriting changed, less steady, more pressure behind each word. Sentences shorter, more direct. I think they know. Evelyn stopped, read it again. They've been watching the house at night. A faint chill moved through her. She glanced toward the cabin behind her. Still, silent. Then back to the page. I can't go to the sheriff. Not here. Not anymore. Evelyn's breath slowed. She kept reading. There are records missing. Land deeds that don't match what's filed. I've spoken to 3 families. All say the same thing. They were told not to ask. The next page. Someone followed me back from town. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She turned another page. Blank. Then the next. Another entry. Short. They came by today. Didn't knock. The writing here was sharper, pressed into the paper. I won't stop. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, turned the next page, the final entry. Dated. Then, nothing after. They know what I have. Evelyn stared at the words, waited for more. But there wasn't anything else. No explanation. No ending. Just silence. She lowered the notebook slowly. The clearing felt colder now, heavier. Coda pressed lightly against her side. Evelyn placed the notebook back into the trunk, her movements slower now, more deliberate. She looked at the letters again, at the photographs, at the life someone had tried to record and protect. She didn't leave, Evelyn said quietly. The words settled into the air. Not a guess. Not anymore. A realization. Coda didn't move, but his ears shifted slightly, listening. Evelyn closed the trunk partway, leaving it resting open beside her. Her eyes moved back toward the cabin, toward the town beyond the trees. The silence there made more sense now. It wasn't emptiness. It was avoidance. Whatever Lillian Cross had been trying to uncover, it hadn't disappeared. It had just been buried. Hidden. Just like this. And somehow, after all this time, Coda had found it. Evelyn sat there, the notebook still in her lap, the open hatch behind her, the quiet pressing in from every side. And for the first time, the cabin didn't feel like a place she had come to stay. It felt like a place she had walked into, right in the middle of something that had never truly ended. Evelyn didn't move for a long time. The trunk sat open beside her, its contents no longer hidden. The hatch behind it gaped dark and still, like a mouth that had finally spoken after years of silence. Coda stayed pressed against her side, not restless, not alert the way he had been before. Just there. Present. As if something inside him had settled. Evelyn looked down at the notebook again, her fingers resting lightly on the worn cover. The last words lingered in her mind, repeating in a quiet loop she couldn't quite silence. They know what I have. She closed the notebook slowly. The air around her felt heavier now. Not threatening, just full. Full of things she didn't understand yet, but couldn't ignore. "All right," she whispered. Her voice sounded smaller out here. She glanced back at the cabin. It looked the same as it had when she arrived. Weathered. Still. But now it carried something else. Context. Meaning. She reached for the letters again, lifting one carefully from the stack. The paper was fragile, edges softened with time. The handwriting matched the notebook. Lillian's. Evelyn unfolded it gently. The words were slower here, less hurried, more deliberate. She read in silence. Moss. Descriptions of land meetings, names repeated, mentions of boundaries shifting quietly, properties changing hands without public notice, families pressured into selling, others simply leaving. Evelyn frowned slightly. This wasn't just suspicion. This was tracking, careful, detailed. She set the letter aside and reached for another, this one shorter, more urgent. "They've started asking about me." Evelyn's breath slowed. Another letter. "They don't like questions. Not here." She looked up. The trees stood exactly where they had always been. The clearing unchanged. But something about it felt different now. As if the quiet wasn't natural anymore. As if it had been shaped. She gathered the letters carefully and placed them back into the trunk. Her movements were slower now, measured, every action deliberate. Coda shifted slightly, his body relaxing further into the ground beside her. Evelyn noticed. "You're calmer," she said softly. Coda didn't respond, but his breathing had deepened. His posture no longer held that tight, watchful edge. Whatever had driven him to circle, to scratch, to dig. It wasn't pulling at him the same way anymore. He had found it, and now he didn't need to keep searching. Evelyn looked back at the hatch. Still open. Still dark. A part of her wanted to close it immediately, to cover it again, to return everything to the way it had been. But she didn't. Instead, she reached for the trunk and carefully lowered the lid, leaving the latch open. Not sealing it. Not yet. She sat back again, her knee throbbing steadily now, reminding her of the fall, of how quickly everything had shifted. One moment she had been trying to carry firewood. The next, this. She let out a slow breath. "This wasn't meant for me," she said quietly. The words hung in the air, but they didn't feel entirely true, because if it hadn't been meant, Coda wouldn't have found it. She looked at him again. "You knew something was wrong," she murmured. He opened one eye briefly, then closed it again, resting. Evelyn leaned back on her hands, her gaze drifting toward the edge of the clearing, toward the direction of town. Ridge Hollow, the store, the diner, the way people had gone quiet, the way they had avoided her eyes. That place should have stayed quiet. She heard the words again, clearer now. They weren't warnings, they were habits, things people said when they had already decided not to act. Evelyn shifted slightly, wincing at the pain in her knee. She would need to wrap it later. Take care of it. But that felt distant, secondary, because the weight of what she had found pressed harder than the ache in her leg. She picked up the notebook again, turned to the last page, read the final line once more, then closed it. Her fingers lingered there for a moment. Then she placed it back into the trunk, carefully, respectfully, as if returning something to someone who wasn't there anymore. The light had shifted while she sat there. The sky had softened into a dull gray again, the sun hidden behind a layer of clouds that flattened everything beneath it. Time had passed, more than she realized. Evelyn looked at the cabin again, at the door, at the window. She pictured Lillian inside, sitting at the same table, writing, watching, waiting. Alone. A quiet heaviness settled in her chest. Not fear, not yet. Something closer to recognition. The kind that comes when you understand a situation just enough to know it matters, but not enough to know what to do with it. She pushed herself up slowly, using the edge of the hatch for support. Her knee protested immediately, sharp, unsteady. Easy, she muttered. Coda stood at once, alert again, but not tense, just attentive. She steadied herself, then looked down at the trunk. She couldn't leave it open. Not like this. Not exposed. She bent slightly, ignoring the discomfort, and lifted it again. Not all the way, just enough to slide it back toward the opening. Coda stepped aside, giving her room. Evelyn lowered it carefully back into place. The hollow space accepted it easily, as if it had never been disturbed. She paused, then lowered the hatch. The wood settled back into the earth with a soft, muted sound. The seam closed. The ground looked almost the same. Not perfect, but close enough. Evelyn brushed loose dirt over the edges with her hands. A simple motion. Instinctive. She didn't know why she did it, only that it felt right. Coda watched her, quiet. When she finished, she sat back again, breathing slowly. The patch of ground looked still, unremarkable, just like it had before. But she knew better now. She pushed herself to her feet again, slower this time. "Come on," she said softly. Coda followed her without hesitation. They walked back toward the cabin, each step measured, each movement heavier than before. At the door, Evelyn paused. She looked back once, at the spot, at the trees, at the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't harmless. And it wasn't forgotten. She stepped inside. The cabin closed around her again. But it didn't feel the same. Not quiet. Not simple. Now, it felt like a place that was holding something. And for the first time since she arrived, Evelyn understood why no one in town wanted to talk. Because once you knew, you couldn't unknow it. And that weight didn't stay outside. It followed you in. Evelyn closed the door behind her with a soft push. The latch clicked into place. The sound felt louder than it should have. Coda moved ahead of her, crossing the room slowly, his paws quiet against the worn wood. He no longer stopped at the back wall, no longer stared. He circled once near the center of the room, then lay down. For the first time since they arrived, he rested without watching. Evelyn noticed immediately. She stood there for a moment, her hand still resting on the door. "You're done, aren't you?" she said quietly. Coda didn't lift his head, but his breathing had changed. Deep. Even. Calm. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Something in her chest tightened. Not from fear, from the shift. Whatever had driven him, it was gone now. Because the thing he had been searching for, it wasn't hidden anymore. Evelyn moved toward the table and sat down carefully, favoring her injured leg. The chair creaked under her weight. The room looked the same. The mug still in the sink. The coat still hanging by the door. The open book on the table. But nothing felt untouched anymore. She folded her hands together, staring at the surface of the table without really seeing it. Her mind moved back to the notebook, to the letters, to the final entry. They know what I have. She rubbed her thumb slowly across her palm. What am I supposed to do with that? She murmured. The question didn't expect an answer, but it didn't leave either. She leaned back in the chair, her gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the light had dimmed again. Clouds had thickened overhead, flattening the sky into a dull gray that pressed low against the trees. The clearing looked smaller now, closed in. Evelyn reached for the edge of the table and pushed herself up slowly. Her knee protested immediately. Sharp, unsteady. She paused, letting the pain settle. Not today, she muttered. But she knew it wasn't just about her leg. She moved to her bag and pulled out a strip of cloth, wrapping it around her knee tightly. The pressure helped. Not enough to fix it, but enough to stand. Coda lifted his head briefly as she moved, watched her, then rested again. Evelyn looked at him. You trust me to figure this out, don't you? He blinked once. That was all. But it was enough. Evelyn turned back toward the door. Her hand hovered near the handle, then pulled away. No, she said quietly. Not like this. Not here. The town came back to her. The store. The diner. The silence. The way people had shut down the moment she spoke. They already know, she whispered. That realization settled into her more firmly now. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to stay quiet. Enough to avoid it. Evelyn walked back to the table and sat again. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad and pen. If Lillian had written things down, so would she. Evelyn began to write. Simple things at first. The hatch, the trunk, the letters, the name. Lillian Cross. Her handwriting wasn't as neat, not as practiced, but it was steady. She paused, then added more. The town's reaction, the woman at the store, the waitress, the silence. The phrase repeated in her mind again. That place should have stayed quiet. Evelyn pressed the pen harder against the paper. Why? She underlined the word once, then again. The question lingered, heavy, unanswered. She set the pen down slowly. There was only one way to find out. Not here. Not in Ridge Hollow. Somewhere outside. Somewhere the silence didn't belong. Evelyn pushed herself to her feet again. This time she moved with purpose. Slow, careful, but decided. She crossed to the small shelf near the wall and picked up the notebook she had brought with her. Then her coat. She paused at the door again. Coda was already on his feet, watching her. Ready. Yeah, she said softly. I figured you'd come. She opened the door. The cold air hit her again. Sharper now. Cleaner. Outside, the clearing felt different. Not lighter, but clearer. The patch of ground behind the cabin sat still, untouched. She didn't look at it for long, just enough to acknowledge it. Then she turned away. The path to the car felt longer this time, each step measured, her knee slowing her pace. Coda stayed close beside her, not running ahead, not circling, just walking, matching her rhythm. Evelyn reached the car and opened the door, lowering herself carefully into the seat. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands rested on the steering wheel for a moment before she started the engine. The sound filled the quiet space, steady, grounding. Coda jumped into the passenger seat and settled immediately, facing forward, watching the road. Evelyn glanced at him. "All right," she said. Her voice was calm, firm. "We're not leaving it buried." The words hung in the air, simple, but final. She shifted the car into gear. The tires crunched lightly over the frozen ground as she turned toward the narrow path leading out. The trees waited. The road waited. And somewhere beyond them, answers waited too. Evelyn didn't look back, because she already knew. This wasn't something she could walk away from. Not anymore. The drive out of Black Ridge County felt longer than it had the day before. The road didn't change. The trees didn't change. But Evelyn did. Her hands stayed steady on the wheel, though her knee ached with every shift of pressure. Coda sat beside her, calm now, no longer scanning, no longer tracking something unseen. Whatever had pulled at him had let go. The farther they drove, the more the air seemed to open up. The trees thinned, the sky widened, and the quiet that followed them from the cabin began to loosen its grip. By the time she reached the edge of the next county, the roads were busier, not crowded, just lived in. Evelyn pulled into a small parking lot outside a low brick building. No sign out front, just a simple door. She turned off the engine and sat for a moment. Her reflection stared back faintly in the windshield. Tired, steady, changed. "All right," she said quietly. She stepped out of the car, favoring her leg, and reached back for her bag. Coda followed without hesitation. Inside, the building was quiet, clean, the kind of place where voices stayed low and time moved in measured steps. A man behind the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" Evelyn nodded once. "I hope so." Her voice didn't waver. "I need to speak with someone about a property in Black Ridge County." The man studied her for a second, then gestured toward a chair. "Have a seat. Someone will be with you." Evelyn sat. Coda lay down beside her, his head resting on his paws, waiting. It didn't take long. A woman stepped out from a back office, mid-40s, focused eyes, calm presence. "I'm Investigator Hale," she said. "You wanted to talk?" Evelyn stood slowly. "Yes." She reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook and the letters, carefully, respectfully. "I found something," she said. The words felt simple, but they carried everything behind them. Time moved differently after that. Questions, careful ones, names, dates, places. Evelyn answered what she could, what she knew, and what she had read. She didn't try to explain beyond that. She didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Investigator Hale didn't interrupt much. She just listened, watched, and took notes. At one point she asked, "Why bring this here?" Evelyn paused, looked down at her hands, then back up. "Because no one there would listen," she said. The answer settled quietly between them. Hale nodded once. That was the right call. The days that followed were quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. Evelyn returned to the cabin. The trees still stood. The clearing still held its silence, but something beneath it had shifted. The ground behind the cabin had been filled in again, carefully, not erased, just respected. The hatch remained where it was, but it no longer called for attention. Coda didn't circle it anymore, didn't scratch, didn't wait. He walked past it like it was just another piece of earth. And at night, he slept. Fully. Deeply. For the first time since they arrived. Evelyn noticed that more than anything. She sat on the porch one evening, a blanket around her shoulders, watching the last of the daylight slip through the trees. Coda lay beside her, his head resting against her foot. Calm. At peace. The kind of stillness that didn't come from emptiness, but from something being finished. News didn't come all at once. It came slowly. Fragments at first. A name mentioned quietly in a conversation at the store. A vehicle she didn't recognize parked near the edge of town. Voices lowering when she entered, then not lowering quite as much as before, then more. An article in a regional paper. Small. Buried halfway down the page. Investigation reopened into historical property disputes. No details. Just enough. Enough to let something surface. Weeks passed. Then months. The cabin changed. Not dramatically. Just lived in. The table held her things now. The mug in the sink had finally been washed. The coat by the door remained. But it no longer felt like it was waiting. It just existed. Evelyn sat on the porch one morning, watching the early light stretch across the clearing. The air carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Clean. Simple. Coda lay nearby, eyes half closed, breathing slow and even. She looked out toward the trees, toward the path, toward everything that had led her here. I didn't come here for this, she said softly. The words drifted into the quiet. Coda's ear twitched slightly. Evelyn smiled faintly. No one ever does. She leaned back in her chair, letting the sunlight settle across her face. The cabin stood behind her, still old, still worn, but no longer carrying the same weight. Because what had been buried wasn't anymore, and what had been silent was beginning to speak. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, not to rest, just to feel it. The shift, the difference. Sometimes things don't disappear. They wait. Not for time, not for chance, but for someone willing to notice. And when that moment comes, it doesn't ask who you are or why you're there, and it simply opens. And what you do after that becomes part of the story that follows. Evelyn opened her eyes again. The clearing stretched out before her. Quiet, but not empty. Not anymore. Evelyn sat there with the morning light settling into her shoulders. The kind of quiet that doesn't press in on you. It stays beside you. Coda shifted closer, his head resting against her boot, like he always did when things were finally right. Not alert. Not listening for something hidden. Just there. She looked out toward the back of the cabin. You couldn't see the spot anymore. Not really. Just earth. Just leaves. Just another piece of ground no one would think twice about. But she knew. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something she had stumbled into by accident.
It felt like something that had been waiting and finally got answer. Her hand moved slowly to Coda's hand, fingers settling into the fur behind his ear. You didn't let it stay buried, she said softly. Koda didn't move, didn't need to, because he never cared about what it meant, only that it mattered. That's what she hadn't understood before. How easy it is to look away when something feels complicated, when it's not yours, when it's easier to believe it's already over. But he didn't think that way. He just kept coming back to the same place until someone finally paid attention. Evelyn leaned back in the chair, her eyes still on the trees, on the quiet that no longer felt like silence. And somewhere in that stillness, she wondered, how many things have we all walked past just because no one stopped long enough to listen?